My mother spent my college money on a transmission, a family vacation to Gatlinburg, and 6 years of health insurance for a business that never paid me back a cent. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said the fund was spent on things this family actually needed. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten a lawsuit. I opened my own checking account, took out my own loan, and started keeping every receipt in a shoebox, dated and labeled like it was going to matter someday. 3 years later, a bank auditor called me into a conference room, slid one piece of paper across the table, and told me something my own mother didn't know I already knew. Then she turned and asked my mother one question. My mother's face went the color of the folder sitting in front of her. But before that conference room, there was a kitchen table 3 years earlier, on the east side of Marion, Ohio. My mother looked me in the eye and said, "That fund was spent on things this family actually needed." The same week I learned the $40,000 my grandfather left me had been zero for years. I didn't argue. I took out my own loan and kept every receipt in a shoebox. 3 years later, a bank auditor slid one paper across a conference table and told me I'd been the only legal signer on that account since I turned 18. My mother's face went white when the auditor asked her one question. My name is Meredith Colson, and I was 24. I did not scream. I did not beg. I'd been filing paper since I was 16. Every bank letter. Every excuse my parents gave me at the dinner table. Every receipt, dated, boxed, kept. It wasn't a hobby. It was just how I was built. I don't get loud. I get accurate. My grandfather had also left me something else, a lockbox in the garage with my name on a piece of masking tape. My mother told me it went missing years ago, sometime after he died. I never quite believed her. I just never said so out loud. Marion isn't a big town. You can walk from the Whetstone Savings Bank branch on East Center Street to my parents' house in under 15 minutes, past the hardware store, past the Dairy Queen that closes at 9, past the boarded-up dry cleaner nobody's rented since I was in middle school. My family's shop, Colson Reliable Motors, sits 3 blocks over on Delaware Avenue, a squat brick building with a hand-painted sign my father repainted himself the summer I turned 12. I grew up smelling motor oil and hearing the compressor kick on through the wall of the office where my mother did the books. My grandfather, Gerald Aldridge, was my mother's father. He ran the tool and die shop out on Route 95 for 30 years before he sold it and retired to a little house with a garden he was prouder of than the shop. He opened a trust for me the year I was born, $40,000, invested slow and steady the way he did everything. He used to tell me, when I was small enough to sit on his knee at the kitchen table, that money you don't touch grows quiet, like a garden left alone in winter. He died when I was 10. Heart, sudden, no warning, gone before the ambulance made it past the county line. I remember the funeral more by feel than by picture, the itch of my black tights, my mother crying into a tissue that didn't do the job, my father's hand too tight on my shoulder like he was afraid I'd float off the pew. Nobody told me anything about the trust again for 8 years. I didn't ask. I trusted my mother to handle it, the way you trust a bank to have your money when you go to the window. I was 17 when I started noticing things didn't add up. It was small stuff first. My mother telling me the shop had a slow month, the same month she bought a new water heater for the house. My father saying business was getting there for 6 straight years, the exact same phrase, like he had it printed on a card he kept in his wallet. I started keeping a shoebox that year, not because I suspected the trust, because I was the kind of kid who liked things written down. Report cards, insurance letters, the receipt from my first oil change, which I paid for myself with babysitting money because I didn't want to owe anybody an explanation for anything. I turned 18 the September after I graduated high school. There was supposed to be a conversation about the trust that fall. My mother kept saying we'd sit down and go over the paperwork once the shop's busy season slowed. Busy season became tax season became let's not talk numbers during the holidays. I let it go. I had a part-time job at the Kroger on Main and a plan to take some classes at the community college on my own dime, just to keep moving while the sitting down kept getting pushed. By 20, I had an associate's degree paid for in cash. I earned stocking shelves and doing overnight inventory. By 22, I had a job as an accounts payable clerk at Herrick Manufacturing, out past the fairgrounds, where I matched invoices to purchase orders all day and never once made a math error anybody could point to. I was good at my job. I liked being good at my job. There's a kind of peace in a column of numbers that actually balances. I asked about the trust again when I was 23. Mostly because a coworker mentioned her own grandfather's money helped her buy a condo, and it needled something in me I'd been ignoring for years. What ever happened with Grandpa's account? I asked my mother on a Sunday over pot roast. She didn't look up from her plate right away. It's fine, Meredith. It's handled. Handled how? You don't need to worry about it. I let it sit for another 8 months. That's not patience, not exactly. That's just how I move through things I'm scared of. Slow and from the side. The week everything actually broke open, I was 24, and I'd finally decided I was done letting it's handled be an answer. I drove over on a Tuesday evening in March. No plan beyond asking a straight question and getting a straight answer for once in my life. My mother was at the kitchen table with a stack of bills when I walked in. My father in the next room with the television low. The house smelled like coffee gone cold in the pot, the way it always did by 6. I want to see the paperwork for my trust, I said. The one Grandpa set up. My mother set her pen down. Meredith, we've been over this. We haven't, actually. Not once. Not with numbers. She looked at my father through the doorway. He didn't come in. That told me something, even before she opened her mouth. That account's been drawn down for years, she said. Your father's shop needed it. The insurance, the equipment, the loan payments when things got tight. It kept the lights on down there. How much is left? Nothing's left, Meredith. I felt my face go still. Not blank, exactly. Still, the way water goes still right before it freezes. $40,000, I said. That's zero now. That fund was spent on things this family actually needed, she said, and her voice had an edge to it, like I was the one being unreasonable, like I'd asked her to hand over a kidney instead of an explanation. You've got a good job. You've got a roof. What exactly do you think you're owed? I didn't answer that the way I wanted to. I didn't say the roof was one I paid rent under, or that a good job doesn't erase what a grandfather leaves you on purpose, on paper, with his own signature. I sat there for maybe 40 seconds, the refrigerator humming behind me, my mother's pen tapping once against the bill stack like a period at the end of a sentence she considered finished. Okay, I said. That was it. That was the whole fight. My mother looked almost disappointed I didn't give her more to push against. I drove home that night past the shop on Delaware Avenue, dark, the sign unlit, my father's truck the only one in the lot. I didn't stop. I didn't call anyone crying. I went home, sat at my kitchen table, and I got out a legal pad. I wrote down every number I could remember from every letter that Trust had ever sent, going back as far as I had copies. I wrote down the date. March the 9th. I wrote down what she'd said, word for word, while it was still fresh enough to get right. Then I put the pad in the shoebox, on top of the oil change receipt from when I was 16, and I went to bed. The next morning, I called a loan office on West Center Street, 10 minutes from the branch where my grandfather used to do his own banking, and I asked about financing an associate's to bachelor's completion program at the regional campus. $16,800, 4 years, my own name on every line. I didn't say a word to my mother about it. Not that week. Not for a long time after. I want to tell you I felt something dramatic driving home from that loan office, some hinge in my chest swinging open. I didn't. I felt tired and a little bit lighter, The way you do after you stop waiting on somebody to be honest with you and just start being honest for both of you instead. I had no idea, that morning, that a trust filing with my grandfather's signature and a bank's own paperwork were sitting in an archive 3 miles from that loan office, saying something about that account my mother had never once mentioned. I didn't know it yet. I wouldn't know it for 3 more years. But I kept the receipts anyway. I kept every single one. The loan office gave me $16,800 at 6%, and I signed for every cent of it myself. Nobody co-signed. Nobody needed to know. I kept working the day shift at Herrick Manufacturing and took night classes twice a week at the regional campus, 20 minutes down Route 23. I ate a lot of drive-through chicken sandwiches in a parking lot between clocking out and class starting. I didn't complain about it. I didn't tell anyone at work either, except my supervisor, who signed off on flexible hours because I never once missed a deadline. That first semester cost $2,100. I remember the number because I wrote it on the legal pad the same night, right under the date. I was building my own file now, separate from the shoebox, a spreadsheet with columns for tuition, books, gas, and the loan balance ticking down a little every month. My mother thought I was still just working. She never asked what I did with my evenings. That suited me fine. About 4 months in, I went to Sunday dinner like always. Pot roast again, or maybe chicken. I don't remember the food. I remember the conversation. Business is finally turning a corner, my father said, spearing a piece of carrot. That transmission rebuild contract with the county garage is steady work now. That's good, I said. My mother nodded like she was agreeing with a weather report. It's been tight, but we're managing. Grandpa's money went where it needed to, kept this family standing. I chewed and didn't answer right away. Inside, something in me went very quiet and very sharp at the same time. She said it so easy, like a fact everybody already knew and accepted, the way you'd say the sky is blue. Where'd it actually go, though? I asked. Casual. Just a question over green beans. I told you. The shop. The insurance. That transmission for your father's truck, remember? When it went out on 71? How much was the transmission? She blinked. I don't remember exactly. $2,800 maybe. I did remember. I had the receipt. $2,290, dated 4 years back, filed under T for transmission in a shoebox in my closet. She was off by $500 on a bill she supposedly paid out of my money. I didn't correct her. I just said, huh, and passed the rolls. That's the thing nobody tells you about staying quiet on purpose. It doesn't feel like losing. It feels like keeping score somewhere nobody else can see the board. My father brought up the shop's loan a few minutes later, more to my mother than to me, like I wasn't sitting right there. Gary called again about the note, he said. Wants to know if we're current. We're current, my mother said, too fast. You sure? Because last time you said we were current the way I'm current on my dentist appointment. She shot him a look across the table, sharp enough that even I felt it land somewhere near my own chest. We're fine, Frank. Gary was my father's older brother. He'd co-signed the note on Colson Reliable Motors back when the shop first needed a loan for new lift equipment, something like $18,000, if I remembered the old paperwork right. I filed that away too. Not because I planned anything with it yet, just because it didn't add up, and things that don't add up are the only thing in this world that's ever really held my attention. I went out to the garage before I left that night, told my mother I was looking for my old bike pump. That wasn't a lie exactly. I did look for the bike pump. I also looked the way I'd been meaning to for years and kept finding reasons not to, for the lockbox. Gerald had built me a fireproof lockbox the year I turned 16, gray steel, a little dented on one corner, with a strip of masking tape across the top that said, in his blocky handwriting, Meredith, open at 18. I remembered it sitting on the third shelf of the garage cabinet for years. I remembered seeing it as recently as the year I graduated high school, right before everything about the trust started going quiet. It wasn't on the third shelf. It wasn't on any shelf. I moved a stack of paint cans and an old car battery charger and found nothing but a ring of rust where something metal had sat for a long time. I went back inside. My mother was rinsing dishes. "Where's the lockbox Grandpa left me?" "The gray one, in the garage." She didn't turn around right away. "What lockbox?" "You know what lockbox. It had my name on it. Open at 18. Meredith, I don't know what you're talking about. If your grandfather left something like that, it's probably long gone. Things get lost in a garage over the years. You know how it is. I saw it when I was 18. I just never opened it because you told me the trust paperwork was all handled through the bank." "Well, I don't know what to tell you. Your grandfather didn't leave a lockbox. He wasn't the type for secrets." That last part almost made me laugh, except nothing about it was funny. He was exactly the type for quiet things done right. That was the whole shape of the man. He signed his name on paperwork instead of making promises out loud, because paperwork doesn't change its story later. I said, "Okay," again, my whole vocabulary shrinking down to that one word whenever she lied to my face. I didn't get loud, I got accurate. I just filed the date and her exact words on the legal pad when I got home, same as always. That was the spring I turned 25 months into paying off my loan, about a year and a half after I'd started the completion program. I'd knocked the balance from $16,800 down to just under $9,000, paying extra whenever a shift picked up overtime. I was proud of that number in a way I didn't share with anybody. It was mine. Nobody had touched it. Nobody could tell me it went somewhere it didn't. I still banked at Whetstone Savings Bank, same branch on East Center Street my grandfather used for 40 years, mostly out of habit, and partly because the tellers there had known my family since before I could talk. I went in on an ordinary Thursday to sort out a direct deposit mix-up with my paycheck. Nothing dramatic, just a form that needed updating. The teller who helped me was younger than me, knew enough that she still double-checked things with a supervisor. While she typed, I asked, half out of curiosity and half out of something I couldn't quite name yet, "Is there a way to check if I'm listed on any old accounts under my name? Like from when I was a kid?" "Sure, I can pull that up." "You have an ID?" She typed my name and date of birth into the system. Her fingers stopped moving for a second. She frowned at the screen the way you frown at a math problem that isn't coming out right. "Give me 1 second," she said, and got up from her chair. She came back a few minutes later with a woman I hadn't seen before, mid-40s, gray blazer, reading glasses pushed up into short, dark hair. She introduced herself as Rosalind Kim, senior compliance auditor, and said there was an inconsistency in an older trust account tied to my name that she wanted to look into more carefully. "Nothing to worry about right this second," she said, "but I'd like to schedule some time with you, if you're willing. Bring any paperwork you might have, even old stuff. Especially old stuff." I told her I had plenty of that. She gave me her card, and I noticed her handwriting on the back, a date, a time, 10 days out. I remember thinking, driving home past the shop on Delaware Avenue, its sign lit for once, that 10 days felt like a very long time to sit with a feeling I didn't have a name for yet. It wasn't dread exactly. It was closer to the feeling right before you flip a light switch in a room you already know is empty, except some old, stubborn part of you isn't sure. I didn't tell my mother about the appointment. I didn't tell my father either. I went home and pulled every piece of paper I had out of the shoebox and the spreadsheet and stacked it on my kitchen table in date order, going back 9 years. And I read through every single page one more time, just to be sure I hadn't missed anything, just to be sure the numbers still said what I remembered them saying. They did. Every one of them. 10 days felt long, but I used every one of them. I made copies of everything at the library on Main Street, 20 cents a page, and I didn't flinch once at the cost. I wrote a timeline on a fresh legal pad, One line per year, starting the year I turned 18. I brought all of it in a plain manila folder. Nothing fancy, because fancy wasn't the point. Accurate was the point. Rosalind Kim's office was on the second floor of the East Center Street branch, past a hallway that smelled like carpet cleaner and printer toner. She had reading glasses on a chain and a desk with exactly one photo on it, a golden retriever, nothing else personal in sight. She shook my hand like she meant it. "I did some digging before you got here," she said. "I hope that's all right. That's why I'm here." She opened a folder of her own, thicker than mine, and turned it so I could see. This account was opened in 2002. Custodial trust, under a program the bank doesn't even offer anymore. In 2012, it got restructured. 2012, I said. That's the year my grandfather died. Right around then, yes. She tapped a page. The restructuring names a sole trustee, effective on the beneficiary's 18th birthday. Before that, 2 custodial signers manage it on the minor's behalf. My mother and father, correct. Diane and Frank Colson, custodial signers only, until the beneficiary turned 18. She looked up at me over the glasses. "Meredith, the beneficiary is you." I didn't say anything for a second. The room didn't spin, nothing dramatic like that. It just went very quiet in my own head, like somebody had turned a dial down on everything except her voice. "Say that part again," I said. "You were named sole trustee on this account, effective your 18th birthday. September of that year." She turned another page around. "After that date, the signature authority for your parents should have ended, automatically, per the trust language. It didn't end." "No." She slid a printed statement toward me, a list of withdrawals stretching down the page in neat rows. "This is every transaction on that account going back to your 18th birthday. I haven't finished the full history yet. This is preliminary, but I count 41 withdrawals here after the date your authority should have started. Every one of them signed by Diane Colson or Frank Colson. None by me, none by you. You never signed a withdrawal slip on this account in your life, did you? I never even saw a withdrawal slip on this account in my life." She nodded slowly, like that confirmed something she'd already suspected. "There's more. There's a note in the file, from the original setup, about a physical item. A delivery of paperwork tied to the trust, meant to go out around the time of restructuring. My stomach did something small and cold. A lockbox, I said. My grandfather left me a lockbox, gray steel dented on one corner. It said, "Open at 18. She looked down at her file, then back up at me, and something in her face sharpened. "There's a line here referencing a duplicate copy of the trust filing and a personal letter meant for physical delivery to the beneficiary. I don't see a confirmation that it was ever delivered. It wasn't. My mother says she doesn't know what lockbox I'm talking about. She says my grandfather wasn't the type to leave secrets." "Well," Rosalind said, and there was something almost careful in how she said it, like she didn't want to hand me a conclusion before the evidence earned it. "The bank keeps its own archived copy of a filing like this, off-site storage. If your grandfather set this account up the way this note describes, there should be a duplicate of whatever was in that lockbox, sitting in our own records. Can you get it? I can request it. It takes a few business days to come up from storage. It's not digital. It's a physical file from that year." She closed the folder halfway, kept her eyes on me instead. "I want to be straightforward with you about where we stand. What I'm looking at right now suggests your parents may have accessed funds they weren't legally authorized to access for 6 years. That's a serious finding if it holds up. I don't want to alarm you before I've confirmed everything, but I also don't think you should walk out of here without knowing that's what the paper is showing me." I thought about my mother's voice at the kitchen table. That fund was spent on things this family actually needed. I thought about her saying it so easy, so certain, like she believed her own math even when it was $500 off a receipt I had sitting in a shoebox at home. I don't get loud about things, I told Rosalind. I get accurate. That's just how I am. So if you need dates or numbers from my side, I have them. I've had them for years. She almost smiled at that. Most people who come in here have a vague feeling something's wrong. You came in with a filing system. I've had a while to build one. Bring it next time, she said. Everything you've got. Every letter, every statement, every receipt. If your numbers line up against ours, that helps this move faster and it helps it move cleaner. Regulators like clean. Regulators. If this is what it looks like, this isn't just an internal bank matter anymore. Unauthorized access to a trust account, sustained over years, that's something the state looks at too. She said it plainly, no drama in her voice, like she was reading me a weather report instead of a warning. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it so you're not surprised later. I nodded. I felt strange, not triumphant. Not yet. Mostly, I felt like a very long math problem was finally being checked by somebody with a better calculator than mine. There's one more thing, she said, and pulled a smaller slip from the back of her folder. The signature card on this account, current version, on file since the restructuring. It requires the trustee's own signature to authorize any change to custodial status. Yours. There's no signature here matching yours anywhere in this file, which means nobody ever asked you to sign anything, at 18 or after, because nobody wanted you to know you had the authority to say no. That landed harder than the withdrawal numbers had. Numbers are just numbers until somebody explains what they were built to hide. Nobody asked me anything, I said. About any of it. Not once. I believe you. She closed the folder the rest of the way. Give me till next week. I'll have the archived file up from storage by then, and a full transaction history instead of a preliminary one. I'd like you to come back in, and I'd like to have a fuller picture before we talk about next steps. What kind of next steps? If the archive confirms what I think it will, this becomes a formal fraud claim. You'd be the one filing it, since you're the account holder of record. The bank would freeze the account pending review. And your parents would need to be part of that conversation at some point, in a formal setting, not over the phone. I sat with that for a second. Not fear exactly. Something steadier than fear. Something closer to relief with a hard edge on it. Okay, I said. And this time, the word didn't feel like giving up on anything. It felt like the first useful yes I'd said in years. I drove home past the shop on Delaware Avenue again, out of habit more than anything, and the lights were on inside even though it was after 6, my father's silhouette bent over something at the far bay. I didn't stop. I didn't call my mother. I went home and I sat at my kitchen table and I pulled the shoebox out from under my bed for what felt like the 100th time, except this time I wasn't just filing. I was building a case, and for the first time since I was 16 years old, I let myself believe somebody besides me was finally going to read it. That night, I wrote one more line on the legal pad, under the date, under Rosalind Kim's name and title. Signature card requires my signature. Nobody ever asked. I underlined it twice, set the pen down, and turned off the kitchen light. My mother called on a Sunday, cheerful in a way that felt rehearsed. Come for dinner tonight. Pot roast. Your father wants to see you. I almost said no. Then I thought about Rosalind's folder sitting open on her desk, waiting on an archive request, and I decided I wanted eyes on that house one more time before anything moved. I brought a $6 bag of dinner rolls from the Kroger on Center Street, because that's what you do, and I sat down at the same table where my mother had told me the fund had gone where it needed to go. The kitchen smelled like onions and pot roast and something underneath that. Something like bleach, like she'd scrubbed the counters twice before I got there. My father looked thinner than I remembered. Not sick thin, tired thin. How's the shop? I asked, passing the rolls. Fine, my mother said, too quick, same word she always reached for first. My father didn't look up from his plate. Slow month. Slow months normal this time of year. That's when the front door opened without a knock, and my Uncle Gary walked in still wearing his post office uniform, keys jangling, face already red before he said a word. Diane. Frank. He nodded at me. Meredith. Didn't know you'd be here. Gary, we're eating, my mother said. I got a letter from Whetstone today. He pulled a folded envelope out of his jacket pocket and set it on the counter like it was hot. Second notice. You're 2 payments behind on the equipment note. My name's still on that, Frank. Mine. The room went very still. My father's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. It's handled, my mother said. We had a cash flow thing. It's handled. $4,200 behind, Gary said. That's what the letter says. 2 months, $2,100 each. You told me in March you were caught up. We were caught up in March. Then what happened between March and now? Nobody answered that. I sat there with a dinner roll in my hand and felt something settle into place. Quiet, the way a number does when you've been staring at a spreadsheet long enough and it finally lines up with another number 3 columns over. $40,000. Gone from a trust nobody was supposed to touch after I turned 18. A shop that was supposed to be doing fine. A loan note falling behind by exactly the kind of number that would explain where some of that money had gone if you laid the two side by side. I didn't say any of that out loud. I just asked, easy, like I was making conversation, is the shop actually doing okay, Mom? Because you always say fine, but Uncle Gary doesn't look like he thinks it's fine. The shop's fine, she snapped. This is a business thing. It's not something you need to worry about. I'm not worried, I said. I'm just asking. Frank set his fork down. Diane. Don't Diane me at the table, Frank. Gary looked between them and something in his face shifted, like he was doing his own kind of math for the first time. How long has it actually been slow? Because I co-signed that note thinking it was a temporary thing. 18 months in, you told me you had it under control. We do have it under control. You're $4,000 behind, and I'm hearing about it from a collections letter. I watched my mother's hands. She had them folded in her lap, very still, the way you hold your hands when you don't want anyone to see them shake. I thought about the withdrawal slips Rosalind had shown me. 41 of them, and that was before the full history came back. I thought about her signature, over and over, 6 years of it, on money that was never hers to sign for. Grandpa's money went where it needed to go. That's what she'd told me once, years back, when I was still young enough to accept an answer instead of asking a follow-up question. I used to think that meant something noble. Groceries, heat in the winter. Now I sat at that table and thought it probably meant an equipment note on Delaware Avenue, $4,000 at a time. I didn't say any of it. I ate my pot roast. I said it was good because it was. My mother's one true talent, and I let Gary and my father go back and forth about payment plans and grace periods until my phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it under the table, the way you do at a family dinner when you don't want anyone asking who's texting you. It was Rosalind Kim. Archive file came up early. Found something I want you to see in person, not over the phone. Can you come in tomorrow morning, before the bank opens to regular customers? 8:15. I read it twice. Something I want you to see in person, not over the phone. That wasn't the kind of line you wrote about paperwork that confirmed what everybody already expected. That was the kind of line you wrote when you'd found something bigger than you'd planned on. Everything okay? My father asked. The first thing he'd said directly to me all night. Work, I said. Early meeting. My mother reached over and patted my hand. The same gesture she'd used my whole life to close a subject before it opened all the way. You work too hard, honey. You always have. I get it from somewhere, I said, and she took that as a compliment, which was its own kind of answer. I left before dessert, told them I had an early morning, which wasn't a lie. Gary walked out to his truck the same time I walked to my car, envelope still in his hand. You know anything about this? He asked me, low, like he didn't want the sound to carry back through the screen door. The shop being behind? I know they've always said things are fine, I said. That's about all I know. He nodded slowly, folded the envelope back into his jacket. $18,000 I put my name on for that shop. I'd like to not lose it over somebody else's slow month. I hope it works out, I told him, and meant it, mostly for his sake, since none of this was his doing. I drove home with the radio off, running the numbers the whole way. $4,200 behind at the bank. 41 withdrawals at least, off an account that was never theirs to draw from after I turned 18. A grandfather who signed his name on paperwork nobody bothered to read out loud to me until a stranger in a gray blazer did it for him, 6 years too late to matter to anyone but me. I got home, pulled the shoebox out one more time, and added a line to the legal pad under that night's date. Gary, 4,200 behind, 2 months. His name's on the note. I underlined the number, same as I underlined everything that mattered, and set my alarm for 6:30, an hour earlier than I needed for an 8:15 meeting, because I wanted time to look through everything again before I walked back into that bank. I didn't sleep well. Not from nerves exactly. More like the feeling you get the night before a test you've already studied for cover to cover, when there's nothing left to do but show up and let the answer be what it's going to be. At 8:10 the next morning, I sat in the parking lot on East Center Street, watching the bank's front doors still locked, a single light on upstairs where Rosalind's office was. I gathered my folder off the passenger seat, every page in date order, and walked in through the employee entrance she'd told me to use. She was waiting at the top of the stairs, and she didn't smile the way she had the first time. She just said, "Come in and sit down. There's a lot here." I sat. She opened a second folder next to the one from before, thicker, older, the paper inside slightly yellowed at the edges. "The archive came up from storage yesterday afternoon," she said. "I stayed late going through it." "Meredith, there's more in here than a filing." "What kind of more?" She turned the folder around and slid it toward me, and the first thing I saw on top was a photocopy of an envelope. My name written across the front in handwriting I hadn't seen in 14 years. My name, my mother's maiden name still tucked in there too, Meredith Diane Aldridge Colson, in ink that had gone brown at the edges. Gerald Aldridge's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. Birthday cards. A note taped inside an old tackle box. Small, tight letters, always slanted the same way. "This was in the archive?" I asked. "It was in the archive," Rosalind said. "Sealed. Never opened. It's a copy, not the original. Whoever filed this made a duplicate for our records and sent the real one home with your grandfather back in 2012, the one that was supposed to go in the lockbox. That's my read on it too." I touched the photocopy like it might still be warm. "Why would the bank keep a copy of a personal letter?" "Because your grandfather asked them to." She flipped to the next page. "There's a cover memo. He wanted a duplicate on file in case anything happened to the original. He was specific about it. He didn't trust things to survive 14 years in a garage." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was exactly like him. "There's more," Rosalind said, and her voice had that flat, careful shape again, the one she used right before she handed me something heavy. Under the letter. The actual trust document, not the version we pulled before, the original. She slid it across. 2 pages, stapled, a notary stamp in the corner gone pale with age. I read the first paragraph 3 times before it landed. "Trustee, upon beneficiary reaching the age of 18, shall be Meredith Diane Colson, sole." I read it out loud. Slow, like reading it out loud would make it more real. "Sole. Sole," Rosalind repeated. "Not joint. Not your mother as trustee with you as beneficiary. You. Alone. Effective on your 18th birthday." The version I saw before didn't say that. The version you saw before was the restructured filing, dated 8 months after your grandfather passed. Somebody amended the trustee language. She turned the page toward herself, ran a finger down a line near the bottom. This copy doesn't have that amendment. This is the original, the one your grandfather actually signed. I sat back. My hands had gone a little cold. So somebody changed it, I said. After he died. Somebody changed it, she said. Your mother's name appears on the amended version as co-trustee. Your grandfather's signature does not appear on that amendment anywhere, just hers. I thought about my mother at 10 years old. My mother at every age, actually, always so sure of her own math. I thought about her saying, my father wasn't the type to leave secrets. She'd been half right. He wasn't. She was. There's a full withdrawal history in here too, Rosalind said. The one I promised you. Every draw on the account since it opened. How many since I turned 18? 47. The number sat there a second before it fully landed. 47. 47 withdrawals, she said again, quieter. Every one of them signed by your mother, or your father, or both. Not one bears your signature. Not one shows any record of you being contacted for authorization, because I was never supposed to know I had authority to say no. That's what the paper shows. I looked at the letter again, still sealed shut in its photocopy, my name across the front in that same tight, careful hand. Can I see what's inside it? The real letter? That copy is sealed on our end because the original was never opened, Rosalind said. Which means somewhere there's a physical envelope with an actual letter inside it, still closed, that's 14 years old. If your grandfather mailed a copy here for archive, my guess is the real one is exactly where you already think it is. The lockbox. The lockbox, she said, which your mother says doesn't exist. I sat with that. Gray steel, dented on one corner, open at 18. I had held that box in my hands when I was 17, in my grandfather's garage, before anyone thought to tell me it needed hiding. There's one more thing, Rosalind said, and this time she didn't reach for a folder. She just looked at me straight on. I ran your family's business accounts as part of standard cross-reference, since Whetstone also services the loan on Colson Reliable Motors. My stomach dropped a little. You can do that? I can look at payment status on any loan this bank holds if it's relevant to an active fraud review. It's relevant. She folded her hands. The equipment note is 2 payments behind. Same amount your uncle mentioned to you at dinner, I'd guess, based on your face right now. You don't know about the dinner. I don't. But you just told me there was one. She almost smiled, just barely, tired around the edges. The timing lines up close enough that I'd bet good money the trust withdrawals and the shop's cash flow gaps aren't a coincidence. I can't prove that yet on paper. Not without another few weeks of bank matching. But I've been doing this a long time. I know what it looks like when a family's been patching one hole with another. So what happens now? Now I schedule a formal meeting. You, your parents, me, probably someone from our compliance office and maybe outside counsel depending how this develops. I present the trust document. I ask your mother directly about the withdrawals. You decide on the record whether you want to file this as fraud. She paused. I think you already know what you want to do. I just need you to say it out loud, in the room, when it counts. I don't get loud, I said. I get accurate. Good, she said. Bring the shoebox. She let me keep the photocopies, said I'd earned that much. I drove home with the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like it was something alive, and I didn't open the smaller one, the one with my name on it, not right away. I set it on my kitchen table instead, next to the shoebox, and I looked at the two of them side by side for a long time. 14 years of my mother's version of events on one side, my grandfather's actual handwriting on the other. I picked up my phone and texted Gary before I could think better of it. You said 18,000 on that note. Has the bank said anything to you directly about a missed payment before this last letter? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. No. First I heard was Tuesday's letter. Why? Just trying to understand the timeline, I typed back. I'll explain more soon. Promise. I set the phone down and finally picked up the smaller envelope. My name looked back at me in ink gone the color of weak coffee. I turned it over once, ran my thumb along the sealed flap, and didn't open it. Not yet. Some things you don't rush, even after 14 years of waiting on them. I put it in the shoebox, on top of everything else, and went to bed, knowing that whatever was inside, I wanted to be ready for it, not just curious about it. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long minute before I picked the envelope back up. I told myself I'd wait. That lasted about 9 hours. I slit the flap with my thumbnail, careful, like the paper still mattered after 14 years. Inside was one page, folded in thirds, the creases gone soft and gray. Meredith, if you're reading this, you turned 18 and somebody finally handed you what's yours. I hope it was easy. I doubt it was. The account has $40,000 in it as of the day I'm writing this. That's every dollar I could spare since the year you were born, plus what your grandmother left when she passed. It is not a loan to the family. It is not a cushion for hard months at the shop. It is yours for school, full stop. I love your mother. She's my daughter and I raised her the best I knew how. But I've watched money move through that house for 30 years, and it never sits still long. So I did something about it. The account is set up so it's only ever really yours once you're grown. Not hers, not your father's. Yours. If anybody tells you it's gone, ask to see the paper. Paper doesn't lie, even when people do. I'm proud of you already, and I haven't even seen what you grow into. Grandpa Gerald. I read it twice, then a third time, slower, on the line about paper not lying. He'd known. Maybe not the exact shape of it, not 47 withdrawals and an equipment note behind at the bank, but he'd known enough to write that line down and mail a copy to himself, just in case. He'd built a lock nobody was supposed to find the key to until it was too late for anyone to argue about it. I folded the letter back along its own creases and set it in the shoebox on top, where I'd see it first every time I opened the lid. I didn't cry. I want to be honest that I thought I might, and I didn't. What I felt was closer to relief, the kind you get when a doctor finally names the thing you've had for years instead of telling you it's nothing. I texted Rosalind Kim the next morning before I left for work. Read the letter. I'm ready for the meeting whenever you can get it on the calendar. She wrote back inside 10 minutes. Thursday, 4 p.m., our main conference room. I've already looped in our compliance director. I want you there at 3:45 so we can walk through it before anyone else arrives. Thursday, 3 days out. I put it on my phone calendar under a name that wouldn't mean anything if anyone else ever saw my screen. Dentist. Tuesday night, my mother called me twice in a row, which she never did. I let the first one go to voicemail. On the second, I picked up, mostly out of curiosity. Hey, Mom, Gary's been asking me questions, she said. No hello, straight into it. Weird questions. About the trust. Did you say something to him? I told him I don't know much, I said. That was true enough, the way I meant it. Because he called your father tonight and asked if the shops ever borrowed against your college money, which is insane, which is not a thing that happens. Her voice had a thin, fast quality to it, words landing too close together. I don't know where he'd even get an idea like that. That is a weird thing for him to ask, I said, and let it sit there. Right. It's weird. A pause. You haven't been talking to anybody at the bank, have you? About anything? I looked at the shoebox on my counter, at the letter sitting on top of everything else. Why would I be talking to anybody at the bank, Mom? No reason. People at that place, gossip. Small town. Another pause. Longer this time. Your dad's been stressed about the shop lately. That's all this is. Gary's picking a bad week to start asking about money. Is the shop okay? The shop is fine, she said, too fast. The same 3 words she'd used at the dinner table. The same 3 words she'd used my whole life for anything she didn't want, opened up and looked at closely. I have to go, honey. Your father needs the phone. She hung up before I could say anything else, and I stood there in my kitchen holding a phone that had gone quiet, thinking about how many times in 24 years she'd used the word fine to close a door I hadn't even finished knocking on. Wednesday, Gary texted me again. Bank called me directly this time. Not a letter, a person. Asked if I wanted to discuss next steps on the note. What's going on, Mir? Nobody's telling me anything straight. I stared at that for a while before I answered. Next steps meant somebody at Whetstone had already started treating Coulson Reliable Motors like a loan in trouble, not a loan running a little late. That was faster than I'd expected. I wondered if Rosalind's cross-reference had shaken something loose on the commercial side, some flag that traveled between departments once fraud review touched a family's name. I think you're going to want to be free Thursday afternoon, I wrote back. I can't explain everything over text. But something's happening at the bank, and it involves the shop's loan, and it involves money that was supposed to be mine. I'll tell you everything I know as soon as I can. 3 dots. A long time then. I'm off at 3. Tell me where. I didn't invite him to the meeting. That wasn't mine to offer. But I filed his name away next to Thursday in my head, because a man who'd put his own name on $18,000 of somebody else's mess deserved better than finding out secondhand, the way I always had. Thursday morning, I went to work like it was any other day, entered invoices, matched purchase orders, ate lunch at my desk instead of the break room so nobody would ask why I looked like my mind was somewhere else. At 2:30, I told my supervisor I had a doctor's appointment, which by then didn't even feel like a lie so much as a private joke. I drove to Whetstone Savings Bank with the shoebox on the passenger seat, letter on top, and parked in the same spot I'd used the first time Rosalind called me back there. My hands weren't shaking. I actually noticed it, the way you notice weather. Rosalind met me in the lobby at 3:45, wearing the same gray blazer, a thin folder tucked under one arm that I now knew held 14 years of somebody else's careful handwriting turned into evidence. You look steadier than I expected, she said. I've had 3 years of practice being steady, I told her. I don't get loud, I get accurate. She almost smiled at that, the tired kind again. Good, because in about 20 minutes, your mother's going to sit across a table from both of us, and I'm going to ask her one question I don't think she has an answer for. What question? I'm going to ask her to explain 47 withdrawals on an account she was never legally authorized to touch after your 18th birthday. Rosalind glanced at the clock above the teller line. I already know what the paper says. I want to hear what she says. She led me down the same hallway toward the stairs, and I followed her with the shoebox against my hip like it weighed more than it did. All those years finally about to be worth something in a room instead of just a drawer. Rosalind opened the conference room door and let me go in first. Long table, 6 chairs, a pitcher of water nobody would touch. A man was already seated at the far end, laptop open, a legal pad squared off in front of him like he'd measured it with a ruler. Rosalind introduced him as Doug Pemberton, the bank's compliance director. He shook my hand once, firm, no extra words. Your mother and father are in the lobby, he said. We'll bring them back in a minute. I wanted to walk you through format first. Format, I repeated. I ask questions. Ms. Kim presents documentation. You're here as the account beneficiary, not a witness we're grilling. You can speak whenever you want. You don't have to. I don't get loud, I almost said, out of habit, and caught myself. Some things you save. Rosalind set her folder square in front of her seat, unopened. She caught me watching her do it and gave me the smallest nod, like, not yet. Doug went to the door and brought my parents in. My mother had dressed for it. Blazer, the good one, the one she wore to Frank's cousin's funeral 2 years back. My father looked like he hadn't slept, hair combed wrong on one side, like he'd done it in the truck's side mirror. "Meredith," my mother said, surprised, like she hadn't clocked I'd be there. "I didn't know you were coming." "I asked her to," Rosalind said. "She's the account holder." My mother sat. My father sat next to her. Nobody reached for the water. Doug started easy, asked my mother to state her relationship to the account. She said, "Trustee." He asked when that role began. She said when Dad, meaning Gerald, her father, set the account up, the year I was born. "And you understood yourself to be sole trustee," Doug said, "even after Meredith turned 18. "That's how it was explained to me," my mother said. "Explained by whom?" "By my father. Before he passed." I watched her say it, steady voice, eyes on Doug, not on me. She believed her own sentence, or she'd said it enough times that it didn't matter anymore whether she believed it. "Did your father ever mention amending the trust language?" Rosalind asked, sometime after Meredith turned 10. "No. Quick. Too quick. There was no amendment. He set it up once, and that was that." Rosalind didn't open the folder yet. She just nodded, like she was filing the answer away for later, which she was. "Mrs. Coulson," Doug said, "were you aware the account currently shows a balance of 0? The money went to things the family needed," my mother said. Same line. Word for word, like a chorus she'd rehearsed until it didn't cost her anything to say anymore. "Meredith knows that." "I do know that," I said. First thing I'd said in the room. "You told me that at the kitchen table 3 years ago." "Right," she said, like that settled it. "There's also a business loan we need to bring into this conversation," Doug said, and turned his laptop slightly, not toward them, toward himself. "Coulson Reliable Motors. Equipment note, opened 6 years ago, currently 2 payments behind." My father's jaw moved, but nothing came out. "I want to be clear about why that's relevant here," Doug said. "When that note was underwritten, the loan file lists a personal asset as informal backing, not collateral in the strict sense, but it's referenced by name in the file as a reason the loan officer at the time felt comfortable extending the size of note he did." "Which asset?" I said. Doug turned his screen my way, just for a second, then back. "A trust account in Meredith Coulson's name, cited as, quote, family financial cushion supporting the guarantor's overall position." The room went quiet in a way that had weight to it. "That account," Rosalind said, "is the same one we're discussing." My father put both hands flat on the table, like he needed something solid under them. "So the shop's loan," I said slowly, working it out loud because I needed to hear it in my own voice to believe it, "was approved, partly because the bank believed there was $40,000 sitting behind it." "That's the file's language, yes," Doug said. "And there wasn't," I said. "Not really. Not once withdrawals started." "We don't have full visibility into every draw yet," Doug said, careful. "But if this account is found to have been improperly accessed, and if regulators confirm that finding, the note's underwriting basis gets reopened. That can trigger a call provision. Full balance due, not just the missed payments." "How much is left on it?" Rosalind asked. My father answered before my mother could stop him. 18,000, he said, hoarse, give or take. "Frank," my mother said, sharp, a warning. "They're going to find out anyway, Diane." He didn't look at her. He looked at the table. "They're going to find all of it out anyway." My mother's mouth pressed into a line I recognized from every hard conversation of my childhood, the one that meant the topic was closing whether anyone else agreed or not. "The shop is fine," she said, to the room this time, not just to me. "We've had late months before. It's seasonal." 2 consecutive missed payments isn't seasonal, Doug said. It's a pattern the bank is required to escalate. Rosalind finally put her hand on the folder, didn't open it, just rested it there, like she was deciding the order of what came next. Before we go further, she said, I want to put something on the table that changes the shape of this conversation. She looked at my mother, not unkindly, just steady. Diane, do you recall your father keeping a lockbox at his house? Fireproof, gray, labeled with Meredith's name? My mother's hand found the edge of the table. I told her that box was gone, she said. Lost in the move, or thrown out, I don't remember which. We have reason to believe it wasn't lost, Rosalind said. That was when the door opened without a knock. A woman from the front desk leaned in, apologetic, already halfway through the sentence. Sorry to interrupt. There's a Gary Colson in the lobby. He says he's here about the equipment note, and he says he isn't leaving until somebody talks to him. My father's head came up fast. Gary's here, he said, like the words didn't fit together right in his mouth. My mother's face did something I'd never seen it do before. Not anger, not her usual flat calm. Something closer to fear, plain and unguarded, gone almost as fast as it showed. He's not on the loan discussion for today, Doug said, glancing at his pad. He's a co-signer, but this session was scheduled around the trust account specifically. He's about to be part of both, I said, whether we planned it that way or not. Rosalind looked at Doug. Doug looked at the folder still resting under Rosalind's hand. Bring him back, Rosalind said to the woman at the door. If Mr. Colson's name is on that note, he has every right to hear what we're about to hear. The door shut. For a second, nobody in that room said anything at all. My father stared at his own hands like he was trying to remember what they were for. My mother sat very straight, the way people sit when they're bracing rather than resting. I thought about Gerald's letter, folded in thirds in a shoebox on my kitchen counter. Paper doesn't lie, even when people do. He'd known there'd be a room like this one someday. He just hadn't been able to be in it with me. The door opened again, and this time it was Gary, jacket still on, looking like a man who'd driven straight from the shop without stopping to think about what he'd say once he got here. Gary didn't sit right away. He stood at the head of the table, looking at his brother, then at Diane, then at the folder under Rosalind's hand like it might jump. Somebody want to tell me why my name's on a loan that's suddenly in trouble, he said. Because I called the shop for 2 years straight, every month. Frank told me it was fine. It's fine, Diane said, automatic, like a reflex you can't stop even when you know it's wrong. Diane. Gary's voice stayed level, but there was an edge under it now. $18,000 behind. That's not fine. That's a foreclosure letter waiting to happen. Doug Pemberton cleared his throat. Mr. Colson, before we go further, I need to establish why you're here. Are you comfortable discussing this with Meredith present? It touches a separate account of hers. I don't care whose account it touches, Gary said. I co-signed $42,000 on that equipment note 6 years ago. I want to know where it went. $42,000. I hadn't known the original number. $18,000 left meant they'd paid down some of it, slow, over 6 years, while also bleeding my trust account dry on the side. 2 debts, 1 shop, and nobody telling the truth about either one. Rosalind opened her folder now. Not all the way. Just enough to slide 1 page toward the middle of the table, still face down. Mr. Colson, she said, when this note was underwritten, the file cites a personal asset as informal backing, a trust account. It names Meredith specifically. Gary looked at me. Your trust? The one from your grandpa? Yeah, I said. The one your mom always said got used for family stuff. He said it slow, working through it. Used for what family stuff exactly? Nobody answered. My father kept his eyes on his own hands. Frank. Gary's voice dropped, quieter now, which somehow felt worse than if he'd yelled. Tell me the shop didn't run on her college money. It wasn't like that, my father said. Then what was it like? We were behind on payroll one spring, my father said, and once he started, it came out in pieces, like he'd been holding the door shut on it for years, and his arm had finally given out. Diane said her dad's account had cushion in it, said Meredith wouldn't need it for years yet, said we'd put it back before she needed it for school. Put it back with what? Gary said. That was the plan, my father said, quieter still. Frank. Gary said his brother's name like it cost him something. You told me the shop turned a profit 2 years running. You told me that to my face. I didn't want you pulling out, my father said. If you pulled your name off the note, the bank calls the whole balance. I couldn't lose the shop over that. So you lied to me instead, Gary said, and let me keep vouching for a business that was already eating somebody's college fund. Diane's composure cracked at the edges. It wasn't stealing, she said, and her voice had gone thin and fast, the same rhythm from her phone calls to me all week. It was moving money around inside a family. Meredith's father works 2 jobs to keep that shop open. You think that's nothing? I think you spent my niece's money without telling her, Gary said, and let me sign a note believing there was $40,000 sitting behind it that wasn't there anymore. There was a plan to repay it, Diane said. Was there paperwork on that plan? Rosalind asked, mild, like she already knew the answer. Diane didn't say anything. Doug turned his laptop a few degrees, angling it so only he could read it, and type something short. For the record, he said, informal family repayment arrangements aren't something this bank can verify or credit against the account balance. As far as our books are concerned, the account went to 0 and stayed there. How long has it been 0? Gary asked. 4 years, Rosalind said, give or take a few months. Gary sat down then, slow, like his legs had made the decision without him. He looked at me across the table, really looked, the way he used to when I was a kid, and he'd ask if I wanted extra ketchup like it was the biggest decision of my day. You knew, he said. Not an accusation, just tired. I found out 3 years ago, I said. I didn't come to you because it wasn't going to change anything. I took out my own loan. I paid my own way. I figured that was the end of it. Except it wasn't the end of it, Rosalind said, and now she looked at Diane. Because the account still legally belonged to Meredith, not you, her, from the day she turned 18. That's not how my father set it up, Diane said, snapping back to the line she'd used all meeting. Rosalind slid the folder open another inch. Not all the way. Just enough for the top page to show a stamped date in the corner, 2012, and a line of text nobody else at the table could read yet. We'll get to exactly how your father set it up, Rosalind said. I want Mr. Coulson's piece settled first, since he's here. Gary put both hands on the table. What's my piece? Your note was underwritten on the assumption of an asset that didn't exist by the time the ink dried, Doug said. That's a material misstatement in the loan file, not something you did, something the bank will have to review as part of the note's history. Meaning what? Gary said. Meaning I'm on the hook for $18,000 of a business my brother ran into the ground with money that wasn't his? Meaning the bank has to decide whether the note's terms still hold, Doug said. That decision isn't mine alone. It goes through underwriting review this week. Gary turned to my father. You're going to lose the shop. My father didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence did it for him. 6 years, Gary said, mostly to himself. 6 years I put my name next to yours because you're my brother, and I trusted you'd tell me if something was wrong. I didn't want to lose it, my father said again. Like repeating it might make it land different the second time. You didn't lose it, Gary said. You spent somebody else's future trying to save it. That's not the same thing. Diane's hands were shaking now, small, the kind of shake you only notice if you're looking for it. I was looking for it. 3 years of being told the shop was fine, the fund was handled, Grandpa's money went where it needed to. I'd heard that phrase so many times it had worn a groove in me. Grandpa's money went where it needed to. It went to payroll. It went to a used lift for the garage. It went to keeping a business alive that was never actually going to make it, one missed payment at a time, on paper that said Colson Reliable Motors and signatures that were never mine. I have one more thing before we go further, Rosalind said, and now her hand rested flat on the folder, not opening it, just resting there like she was deciding the room could handle one more piece before it handled the next. There's a second document that matters here, she said, looking at my mother now, steady, not unkind. Diane, you told Meredith the lockbox from your father's house was lost. Thrown out or lost in a move, you weren't sure which. I don't remember exactly what happened to it, Diane said. We pulled Whetstone's archive on your father's original trust filing, Rosalind said. Banks keep a copy of record when an account like this gets opened. That copy has been sitting in our records room since 2012. She turned the folder so it faced the middle of the table, still closed on top, one corner lifted just enough that I could see a second date stamped underneath the first. It matches a duplicate that surfaced elsewhere, Rosalind said. Recently. My mother's eyes went to me, quick, sharp, like she already knew where recently had come from. The lockbox, I said. It wasn't lost. No, Rosalind said. It wasn't. Gary looked between us. Lost. What lockbox? My grandfather's, I said. Gerald Aldridge. He kept a fireproof box in his garage before he passed. Had my name on it. My mother told me for years it got thrown out in a move. And it didn't, Gary said. No, I said. It's been sitting in my father's garage this whole time. My father's head came up at that, fast, like I'd said something he hadn't expected me to know. Diane's mouth opened, then closed again. No sound coming out. Doug looked between the three of us, then at Rosalind. I think, he said carefully, we need to hear exactly what's in that filing before this goes any further. All of it. Out loud. Rosalind's hand moved to the edge of the folder. That's fair, she said. Let's do that now. Rosalind lifted the top page and turned it around so the writing faced us. Not a form. A letter. Handwritten, the ink gone brown at the edges, the paper soft the way paper gets after 15 years in a box. This came to us attached to the archived filing, she said. Your grandfather wrote it the same day he opened the trust. We don't normally read personal letters into a compliance meeting, but given what's at stake, I think everyone at this table needs to hear it. My mother's hand moved toward the table like she wanted to stop it. She didn't. Rosalind read it slow, the way you read something you know matters. To whoever is sitting across from my daughter when this box finally gets opened, she read. My name is Gerald Aldridge. I built this account the year Meredith was born, with money I earned pouring concrete for 30 years. It is not family money. It is hers. She paused. Nobody breathed much. Diane, Rosalind read, I love you. But I know you. I know how scared money makes you, and I know scared people do things they'd never do calm. So I didn't leave this account soft. I built it so nobody could touch it but her, once she's grown. Not because I don't trust you to try, because I know you will. My father made a sound low in his throat, like something had been punched out of him. If Meredith is reading this, Rosalind continued, it means she's 18, and the bank has done exactly what I paid them to do. If somebody else is reading it to her instead, in a room like this one, it means it went wrong exactly the way I was afraid it would. Rosalind set the page down. That's the letter, she said, word for word. Nobody spoke. Gary looked at his brother like he was seeing him for the first time in years. My father stared at the table. My mother's face had gone the color of paper itself. He knew, I said. Quiet, not a question. He knew you, Rosalind said, looking at Diane now. That's what it reads like to me. That's not fair, my mother said, and her voice cracked right down the middle of the sentence. He didn't know what our life was going to look like. He didn't know about the shop, the loan, any of it. He didn't need to know the details, I said. He knew the shape of you well enough. I didn't say it loud. I never do. I don't get loud. I get accurate. Doug had gone very still, the way people go still when they're recalculating everything they thought they understood about a file. Ms. Kim, he said, does the archived filing include the trustee designation itself, or just the letter? Both, Rosalind said. They came in the same folder. I'd like to see the designation, Doug said. Rosalind's hand rested on the next page, not turning it yet. We'll get there, she said. I want the box itself on the record first, since Meredith raised it. She looked at me. You said it's been in your father's garage. I found it there 3 weeks ago, I said, behind a shelf of paint cans. It still had the label on it. Meredith, open at 18. Was it locked? Rosalind asked. Yes, I said. I didn't have a key. My grandfather gave me one when I was small, told me to keep it somewhere safe. I still have it. It's on my key ring. Gary looked at Frank. You knew that box was in your garage? My father didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had gone thin. I put it back there myself, he said. Years ago. After Diane told me to get rid of it, I couldn't. I just moved it where she wouldn't look. My mother's head turned toward him slow, like the words landed physically. You told me it was gone, she said. You stood in that kitchen and told me you took it to the dump. I lied, my father said. About that too. The room held that for a second. Diane, who'd spent an hour insisting the box was lost, finding out her own husband had kept it 3 feet from her car for years, out of what looked like guilt, or maybe the last thread of something decent in him. I watched her work through it in real time, the anger and the humiliation fighting for which one got to sit on her face. Why would you keep it, she said, if you weren't going to do anything with it? Because it wasn't mine to throw away, my father said. I knew that much, even when I did everything else wrong. Gary put his hand flat on the table, the same gesture Rosalind had used earlier, like the whole room had picked up a habit of grounding itself against something solid. Frank, he said, how long have you known what was really going on with that account? My father looked at me before he answered, not asking permission, just needing somewhere steady to look while he said it. Since the week Diane first pulled from it, he said. 6 years ago. She told me it was a loan. Said we'd repay it before Meredith needed it. I believed that the first year. Maybe the second. And after that, Gary said. After that, I just needed the shop to survive the month, my father said. I stopped asking what year it was. Diane's composure, which had been cracking in pieces all morning, finally went all the way through. You're all talking like I did this alone, she said, and her voice had climbed, thin and fast. He signed things too. He knew the numbers. He never once said stop. I should have, my father said. Quiet, final, I know that. Rosalind let the silence sit a moment before she moved again. Then her hand went back to the folder, to the page beneath the letter, the one with the stamped date, and the line of text nobody but her had read yet. There's one more thing in this file, she said, and I think it answers the question everyone in this room actually came here to ask. She looked around the table, at Frank, at Diane, at Gary, last at me. It's the trustee designation itself. The clause your grandfather wrote into this account the day he opened it. Doug straightened in his chair. My mother's hands had gone flat and still on the table, like she already knew what was coming and had stopped fighting the shape of it. Before I read it, Rosalind said, I want to pull one more record to sit next to it. The withdrawal log from the 4 years after Meredith's 18th birthday. Every signature on every draw. You already have that, Doug said. I have it, Rosalind said. I want it in front of everyone when I read the other page. so nobody in this room has to take my word for what it says. She reached into the folder for a second stack, thin, stapled, and set it beside the letter. Then she turned back to the trustee page, her finger resting just above the date, and looked up once at Diane before she started to read. Rosalind found the clause with her finger and turned the page so it faced all of us. Trustee designation, she read. Effective the beneficiary's 18th birthday, sole signing authority transfers in full to Meredith Aldridge Colson. No co-signer, no joint authority, no exceptions. She looked up. Sole, she said again, like the word needed its own room. Not joint, not shared, sole. Diane's mouth moved before anything came out of it. That's not what the paperwork said when we opened the account. This is the paperwork, Rosalind said, from when your father opened the account. There isn't another version. Doug leaned in to read it himself, lips barely moving. He sat back slow. So from the date she turned 18, he said, your mother had no legal authority to draw on this account. None. None, Rosalind said. Gary looked at Diane like he was seeing a stranger wearing his sister-in-law's face. 6 years, he said. You've been signing withdrawal slips on money that wasn't yours to touch. I'm her mother, Diane said. I've had authority over things concerning her since she was born. Not this, Rosalind said. Not since 2020. She pulled the second stack toward her, the withdrawal log, and turned it so it faced the table. 47 withdrawals, she said, starting 6 weeks after Meredith's 18th birthday. Everyone signed Diane Colson. A few signed Frank Colson. Not one signed Meredith. She slid her finger down the column of signatures, slow, so nobody could pretend they hadn't seen it. 47, she said again. 0 of them hers. The room went quiet in the specific way a room goes quiet when a number lands that nobody can argue with. My father stared at the page like it might rearrange itself if he looked hard enough. I want to be clear about what this means, Doug said, and his voice had changed, gone careful, the voice of a man picking each word before he set it down. Every draw on this account after 2020 was made without authorization. That's not a family dispute anymore. That's a compliance issue on our end, too. We should have caught the trustee change when it triggered. You're saying the bank missed it, Gary said. The bank missed it, Doug said. That's on us. But the withdrawals themselves, who authorized them, who signed them, that's not on us. Diane's hands had gone still on the table, too still, the stillness of someone holding very hard onto composure that's already gone. I want to be clear about something too, Diane said, and it came out thin, reaching for a ledge that wasn't there anymore. Whatever came out of that account went to this family. It went to keeping a roof over Meredith's head. It went to keeping her father employed. It went to the shop, I said. Quiet. It went to keeping us alive, Diane said. It went to the shop, I said again, and this time I let it sit instead of chasing it with anything softer. Grandpa's money went where it needed to. That's what you told me. For years. I finally know where that was. Diane looked at me like I'd hit her, which I hadn't. I never do. I don't get loud. I get accurate. Rosalind let a beat pass before she spoke again. Meredith, she said, as the account's legal trustee, past and present, you have standing to file a formal claim against these withdrawals. I want to walk you through what that means before you decide anything. Walk me through it, I said. A fraud claim triggers an internal review first, Rosalind said. If it clears our review, which given what's in front of us, it will, it gets referred to the state banking division. They have their own process. Restitution, if it happens, goes through them, not directly through us. What's the timeline? Gary asked. Weeks, not days, Rosalind said. Sometimes longer. It isn't fast, but it's real. And the loan? Gary said. My note. Where does that sit while all this is happening? That's a separate track, Doug said. But it isn't unrelated. If the fraud claim confirms unauthorized use of trust funds to prop up the business, the shop's financials get reevaluated as part of our underwriting review. I won't pretend that ends well for the note. Frank hadn't said a word in several minutes. When he finally spoke, it was to me, not to the table. "Are you going to do it?" he said. "File it." I thought about the shoebox on my closet shelf, the receipts, the loan statements I paid on time every month for 3 years, while my mother told people the fund had gone to my education. The lockbox key on my keyring, small and brass and warm from my pocket the whole ride over. "Yes," I said. Diane's face didn't crumble the way I might have pictured it years ago in the version of this conversation I used to run through in my head before I stopped letting myself imagine it at all. It just went flat. Emptied out. "You do that to your own mother," she said. "You did it first," I said. "I'm just the one signing paperwork instead of hiding it." Rosalind reached for a form at the bottom of the folder. Plain, official. The kind of document that doesn't care whose name is on the account or whose name is in the family. "If you're certain," she said, "I can start the intake right now. You'll need to sign as complainant. I'll need statements from everyone at this table before you leave." "Everyone," Doug said, glancing at Frank and Diane. "Everyone who signed a withdrawal slip," Rosalind said. "That's how the record has to read." Frank looked at Diane. Diane looked at the folder like it might still change its mind about what was inside it. Gary pushed back from the table, slow, and stood. "I need to call my lawyer," he said, "before I sign anything about that note." "That's your right," Doug said. Gary looked at me, and for a second the years fell off him, back to a man handing a kid extra ketchup because she asked nice. "I'm sorry," he said, "for not asking harder, sooner." "You didn't do this," I said. "You don't have to carry it." He nodded once and didn't sit back down. He stood near the door instead, phone already out, thumb finding a contact. Rosalind slid the intake form toward the center of the table and set a pen beside it. "Meredith," she said, "whenever you're ready." I picked up the pen. It was lighter than I expected, cheap, a bank giveaway with Whetstone savings printed down the barrel in faded gold. I thought of my grandfather's letter, the ink gone brown, the paper soft from 15 years in a box nobody was supposed to find until it mattered. I signed my name. Diane watched me do it and didn't say anything at all. Rosalind slid the form into a folder of its own, separate from the rest, and looked at Frank first. "Mr. Coulson," she said, "I need a statement from you. In your own words. What you knew and when." Frank nodded slow. He didn't look at Diane before he started talking, which told me something on its own. "I signed withdrawal slips starting in 2020, he said. "I knew the money was Meredith's. Diane told me it was temporary. I kept believing that longer than I should have." "Dollar amounts if you have them," Rosalind said. "I don't have exact numbers," Frank said. "The shop's books do." Doug made a note. "We'll need those books too," he said. "If this account financed operating costs, the loan committee is going to want the full picture, not just this year. All 6. The note's for $86,000, Gary said from the doorway, phone still in his hand. "I just got off with my attorney. He wants copies of everything before end of day." Diane's head came up fast. "End of day," she said. "Gary, it's not even noon." "I know what time it is," Gary said. "I also know I co-signed a note for a shop that's been running on a dead man's money, not on real customers. My name's on that paper too. Nobody argued with him. Nobody could." Rosalind turned back to Diane. "Mrs. Coulson," she said. "Same request. Your statement." Diane's hands were flat on the table again, knuckles pale. "I want a lawyer before I say anything else," she said. "That's your right," Doug said. "But understand, the freeze on this account isn't contingent on your statement. That happens today either way." Freeze, Diane repeated, like the word tasted wrong. Standard procedure once a fraud claim is filed, Rosalind said. No further withdrawals, no transfers until the review clears. I'll have the notice generated before you leave this building. I watched my mother do the math in her head. I'd watched her do that math for years, quiet behind her eyes, whatever bill was due against whatever was left. This time there was nothing left for the math to land on. The shop's payroll runs Friday, Diane said, not to Rosalind, to the table, to nobody. Then the shop's payroll runs on whatever's actually in the shop's account, Gary said, not on my niece's money. That word, niece, landed different than anything else said in that room. Soft, almost. Like he still meant it kindly even now. Doug closed his folder halfway. I'll draft the referral to the state banking division this afternoon, he said. They'll want to interview everyone at this table separately. That usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to schedule. And in the meantime, Frank said. In the meantime, the account stays frozen, the loan gets reassessed, and everybody goes home, Doug said. Gary's phone buzzed again in his hand. He glanced at it, jaw tightening. That's my lawyer, he said. I have to take this outside. He left. Diane watched the door swing shut behind him like she was watching something more than a door close. Rosalind gathered the folder, the letter, the withdrawal log, the trustee page, and slid them all into a single envelope, sealing it with a strip of tape from her own desk drawer. I'll have copies made for everyone before you leave, she said. Meredith gets the originals. Legally, they're hers. They were always hers, I said. Quiet. My mother looked at me then, really looked, the way she hadn't since I was small, and she still checked to see if I was warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. Whatever was behind her eyes now wasn't concern. It was closer to grief. Grief for the version of this where I never found the letter, never asked the teller a question that didn't need asking, never drove myself to a bank on a Tuesday because I didn't trust anyone else to file my own paperwork right. You could have just asked me, Diane said. Before all this. I did ask you, I said. For 8 years. You told me it was gone. She didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one. Doug stood, signaling the meeting toward its end, papers squared under one arm. I'll walk everyone out, he said. Statements can be scheduled for later this week, individually, if that's easier. It's easier, Frank said. Diane didn't say anything. She just stood, slow, like her knees had aged 10 years in the last hour. We filed out past the teller counter where all of this had technically started, 3 weeks earlier, with a question I asked a girl named Ashley about a routine transfer. Ashley looked up as we passed, saw my mother's face, and looked back down at her register fast, the way people do when they know they've seen something they weren't supposed to. Outside, the July heat sat heavy over the parking lot, off East Center Street, the kind of Marian afternoon that makes the asphalt shimmer. Gary was still on his phone near his truck, pacing a tight line, voice low and clipped. Frank stood by the passenger door of the same truck he'd driven for 11 years, hands in his pockets, not looking at anyone. Diane came to a stop a few feet from me on the sidewalk. Colson Reliable's been in this family 30 years, she said. I know, I said. You could end it. Today. Just by not filing. I already filed, I said. It's not undone by wishing. She flinched at that, small, like I'd touched something raw. I never wanted this for you, she said. Any of it. I know that too, I said. It's not really about what you wanted. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out without thinking, an old habit, and her face changed, reading whatever was on the screen. She didn't show it to anyone. She just put the phone away and stared at the parking lot like it might tell her what to do next. Everything okay? Frank asked from the truck. It's the parts supplier, Diane said. They want the invoice paid by Friday or they're pulling the account. Nobody said anything to that. There wasn't anything left to say that hadn't already been said inside, in front of Rosalind and Doug, and a sealed envelope with my name on the front of it. Gary ended his call and walked back over, phone still warm in his hand. "My lawyer wants a meeting with both of you," he said, looking at Frank and Diane, separately from Meredith's claim, about the note. "When?" Frank said. "Thursday," Gary said. "He's not waiting longer than that." Frank nodded, slow, like a man agreeing to a sentence already passed. I got in my own car, the envelope on the passenger seat beside me, my grandfather's letter inside it now instead of behind a shelf of paint cans in a garage nobody was supposed to look at. I sat there a second before starting the engine, watching my parents through the windshield, standing 3 feet apart in a parking lot, not touching, not talking, waiting on a Friday deadline that used to be my problem and had somehow, finally, become theirs. Home was 15 minutes from the bank, a rented duplex off Barks Road, and I didn't turn the radio on the whole drive. I just kept glancing at the envelope on the seat like it might slide off if I took a corner too fast. Inside, I set it on my kitchen table next to the shoebox. Then I did what I always do. I got the tape and the labels, and I filed everything by date, the intake form, the copy of the withdrawal log, the trustee page, right behind the loan statements I'd been keeping since I was 21. 3 years of my own payments, on time, every month, sitting one folder over from 6 years of somebody else's. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that, because people expect crying at this part. I just sat at my table with a pen and wrote the date on a new folder tab, July 14th, the day it stopped being my word against hers. My phone buzzed around 8 that night. Diane. I let it ring twice before I picked up. "You're not answering my texts," she said. "I read them," I said. I didn't have anything to say back. "I need to see you," she said. "Not to fight, just to talk. Tonight." I almost told her no. Then I thought about the shop, about Gary's lawyer, about Thursday coming whether I wanted it to or not, and I figured whatever she needed to say, I'd rather hear it sitting down than standing on a sidewalk again. 20 minutes, I said. "I've got work in the morning." She showed up in 18. I heard her car before I heard the knock, that same rattle in the exhaust it's had for 2 years because nobody in that family fixes their own vehicles anymore. Not really. Not since the shop stopped being about cars and started being about keeping the lights on. I let her in. She didn't sit. "I talked to your father," Diane said. "After you left. We talked to Gary, too. There's something you need to know before Thursday." "Okay," I said. "The note isn't just the shop," she said. "When we refinanced in 22, Gary needed more collateral than the building was worth. Your father put the house up, too. Our house, his and mine." I sat with that a second. "The house is cross-collateralized," I said. "On Gary's note." "Yes," she said. "So if the note defaults." "They can come after the house," Diane said. "Not just the shop." I felt something go tight in my chest, and it surprised me, because I'd told myself for weeks I was past being surprised by anything that came out of that family's finances. "Does Gary know that?" I asked. "Right now? Today?" "He knows we cross-collateralized," Diane said. "He doesn't know how close we've been running. Nobody knows that but your father and me." "And now me," I said. "And now you," she said. Her voice cracked a little on it. Not performance, just true. "Meredith, if you don't drop this, we lose the shop. We lose the house. 30 years gone because of paperwork." "It's not paperwork," I said. "It's $40,000. It's 6 years of you telling me it was gone when it wasn't. It's you signing my name to nothing while you spent every dollar my grandfather left me." "I was trying to save what we had," Diane said. "You spent what I had to do it," I said. "That's the part you keep skipping." She didn't have an answer for that. She never does. Not really. Just different versions of the same plea dressed up new each time. I don't get loud, I said, quiet, because it needed saying one more time, and this was the moment it belonged to. I get accurate. That's not going to change because the number got bigger. Diane looked around my kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. The shoebox, the folders, 3 years of a life she hadn't paid 1 cent toward. You built all this on your own, she said. It wasn't quite a question. I had to, I said. Nobody else was going to. She left a few minutes after that. No slammed door, no last word thrown over her shoulder, just quiet. The same kind of quiet that had sat over the parking lot at Whetstone that afternoon. I locked up behind her and sat back down at the table and didn't sleep much. Thursday came fast. Gary's lawyer had an office on Center Street, 2 blocks from the bank, 2nd floor over a shuttered furniture store. Frank and Diane went in ahead of me. I wasn't required to be there, not for the note itself, that part wasn't my claim. But Gary asked me to come, and I figured I'd earned the right to watch this piece land too. The lawyer's name was Patricia Ivers, gray hair pulled back tight, reading glasses on a chain. She had the loan file open before anyone sat down. I'll be direct, she said. The note's in technical default the moment the bank's review confirms unauthorized diversion of trust funds into shop operations. That review is already underway. Once it's confirmed, the acceleration clause lets the bank call the full balance, $86,000 due in full. We don't have that, Frank said. I'm aware, Patricia said, which is why we need to talk about the house. Gary's jaw tightened. The house is on this note? You didn't know, Patricia said, and it wasn't really a question either, more a confirmation for the record. Nobody told me the house was on this note, Gary said, looking at Frank now, not Diane. 20 years of being brothers sitting right there in his face, cracking. You put Mom and Dad's old house up against my signature and didn't say a word. We were going to catch up, Frank said. We always thought we'd catch up. With what money? Gary said. The money that wasn't yours. Nobody answered that. Patricia let the silence sit a second before she moved things along, the way people do when they've watched enough families come apart across a desk to know arguing doesn't speed up paperwork. Once the state banking division confirms the trust fraud claim, she said, I'll file for Gary to be released from the note entirely, given he had no knowledge of the diversion. That leaves the Colsons personally liable for the balance, with the house as collateral. How long? Diane asked. Small. Weeks, Patricia said. Once it's confirmed, the bank moves fast on acceleration, faster than people expect. Frank stared at the table. Diane's hands were back in that flat, still position I'd started to recognize, the one she got when there wasn't a version of events left to reach for. Gary stood before the meeting was really over. I need air, he said, and walked out without looking at either of them. I found him on the sidewalk a minute later, hands in his pockets, staring at the traffic light like it owed him something. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't know about the house until 2 nights ago either. Not your fault, he said. I keep saying that to you, and I mean it every time. He shook his head slow. 30 years, Meredith. I helped your grandpa pour the shop's foundation. I used to think Frank was the reliable one. Reliable Motors. We used to joke about that. Not much of a joke now, I said. No, he said. Not much of one. He looked at me sideways. You gonna be okay? Whatever's coming for them, I mean. You're the one who started it, but you're not the one it's coming for. I know, I said. I filed what was true. What happens after that isn't mine to carry. He nodded, like he was trying to believe that the same way I'd worked hard to believe it myself. Then he went back inside to sign the papers that would take his name off a debt his brother had used to hide the truth from him for 3 years. And I stood on Center Street a minute longer, watching the light change, before I walked back to my car and drove myself home the same way I'd been doing everything else since this started. Alone, and on time, and with every receipt kept. 2 days after Gary signed off the note, Rosalind Kim called my cell during my lunch break at the plant. I wanted you to hear this from me before the letter arrives, she said. The state banking division confirmed the diversion. All of it. 6 years, 47 withdrawals, 0 authorization from you. Okay, I said. There's something else, Rosalind said. Part of the review pulled the shop's own bookkeeping. Colson Reliable Motors keeps a ledger. Had one all along. And? Line items, she said. Going back to 2018. Payroll, parts, a roof repair. Each one cross-referenced to a trust withdrawal on the same date. Whoever kept those books wrote a note next to 6 of the entries. What note? Grandpa's money, Rosalind said. Went where it needed to. I sat there with my sandwich half unwrapped and didn't say anything for a second. I'd heard Diane say some version of that phrase for years, casual, almost proud of it, like she was doing my grandfather a favor by spending him down to nothing. Hearing it written in her own hand, dated, filed next to a parts invoice, was different. It wasn't a feeling anymore, it was evidence. That's going in the referral, Rosalind said. It corroborates intent. She didn't just take the money, she tracked what she took it for. Thank you for telling me, I said. You'll get a written copy of the findings by Friday, she said. After that, it's out of the bank's hands and into the States. I finished my shift, drove home, and put that phone call in the folder with everything else. Date on the tab. July 18th. The written findings came Friday, like she said, a thick envelope with the bank's return address in the corner. I read it standing in my kitchen, not sitting, like sitting down for it would make it feel bigger than it already was. 47 withdrawals. 6 years. One trustee, and it wasn't Diane. My phone buzzed that same afternoon. Frank this time, not Diane. The bank sent the acceleration notice, he said. His voice sounded thinner than I remembered it. 86,000 due in 30 days, or they start foreclosure on the house. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it, even now. Gary's off the note, Frank said. Patricia got that filed yesterday. It's just your mother and me on it now. Can you pay it? No, he said. Flat. No dressing on it at all. We can't pay 1/10 of it. Then what happens? Shop closes, Frank said. House goes to the bank unless we can refinance somewhere else. And no bank's going to touch us once this hits the county record. I didn't have anything comforting to hand him. I wasn't sure comfort was mine to give anymore. Not after 6 years of watching them decide, over and over, that my name on a piece of paper meant less than their monthly overhead. I'm not asking you to fix it, Frank said. Quiet. I know that's not on you. Okay, I said. I just wanted you to hear it from me, he said. Not find out from Gary. Or the paper. The Marion Star ran 3 lines about it 2 weeks later, buried in a business briefs column nobody reads unless they're looking for their own name in it. Colson Reliable Motors, Delaware Avenue, closing after 30 years, citing financial difficulties. No mention of a trust fund. No mention of me. Just the bare fact of a shop shutting its bay doors for good. I drove past it on a Tuesday, not on purpose, just because Delaware Avenue was on my way to the pharmacy. The sign was still up, Colson Reliable Motors, faded red letters my grandfather picked out before I was born. But the lot was empty. No cars up on the lifts. A padlock through the chain on the front gate, shiny and new, the kind that hasn't rusted yet because it hasn't been there long enough. I didn't stop. I just slowed down enough to see it, and then I kept driving, because there wasn't anything left to say to a locked gate that I hadn't already said to the people who put the lock there. Diane called that night. I almost didn't answer. I picked up on the 4th ring. You saw it? She said. Not a question. I saw it, I said. 30 years, she said, and her voice cracked somewhere in the middle of the word years, like it had finally found the weight it had been circling for weeks. Your grandfather started that shop. Now it's gone because of a piece of paper from 2012. It's not gone because of a piece of paper, I said. It's gone because you spent $40,000 that wasn't yours trying to keep it open, and it still wasn't enough. She didn't answer that. I heard her breathing on the other end, uneven, the sound of someone standing somewhere she didn't want to be standing. The house, she said finally. We might lose the house too. I know, I said. Do you care? She asked. Sharp, sudden, like she needed the sharpness to keep from crying. Any of it? Or is this just numbers to you now? I thought about that question longer than she probably expected me to. I care that you and Dad lose the house, I said. I don't care about the shop, and I stopped caring what you think of how I handled this a long time ago. That's cold, Diane said. No, I said. It's accurate. I don't get loud, I get accurate. I told you that in the parking lot, and it's still true. She was quiet a second. Your grandfather would be ashamed of me, she said. Not asking. Just saying it out loud, maybe for the first time, to someone other than herself. I don't know what he'd feel, I said. I never got to ask him. You made sure of that too, in a way. Every year you didn't tell me the truth was a year I couldn't have asked him anything through the money he left. She hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't call back. I sat at my kitchen table with the phone face down and the folder from that morning's mail still open in front of me, findings and dates and 47 withdrawals lined up in Rosalind's careful compliance language. And for the first time in 3 weeks, I let myself think past the paperwork. Past the freeze, past the referral, past the acceleration notice ticking down toward 30 days that weren't mine to lose sleep over anymore. I thought about the garage, the lockbox, the letter I still hadn't read the whole way through. Not really, not slow, because every time I'd opened it since the meeting at Whetstone, I'd been reading it like evidence instead of like a letter from my grandfather. I decided that weekend I'd read it the other way, just once. Not as Meredith Colson, trustee, 24, keeper of shoeboxes and folders and dates, just as Meredith, his granddaughter. He called it a house. Grandpa always called it that, not the shop, not the business, the house. I never understood why until the letter told me. I got the lockbox down off my closet shelf on a Saturday morning, coffee still hot, phone turned face down on the counter so nothing could interrupt me. I'd read this letter twice already since the audit started. Both times I'd stopped halfway, because both times I was reading it like a document, hunting for the line that would help my case. This time I sat at my kitchen table and read it start to finish, slow, the way you're supposed to read something a dead man wrote just for you. Meredith, it started. If you're reading this, you turned 18, and your mother finally handed over the box like I asked her to. She hadn't, not for 6 more years, but he didn't know that yet, sitting wherever he was sitting when he wrote it, guessing at a future he wouldn't live to see. I opened this account the year you were born, he wrote. $12,000 to start. I added 2,000 more every birthday after that, until the last one I got to see. 14 birthdays. Do the math sometime. It comes out even. I did the math right there at my table. 12,000 plus 2,000, 14 times. $40,000 exactly. He'd built it one birthday at a time, like laying brick, and somewhere along the way, my mother had picked the whole wall apart, one withdrawal slip at a time, until there was nothing left standing. I made you the only name on this account starting at 18, he wrote. Not your mother, not your father, just you. I did that because I watched your mother marry a man who couldn't say no to his own brother, and I watched that shop eat every spare dollar this family ever had. I loved Frank. I loved your mother more, but I wasn't going to let that shop eat you too. I sat with that a minute. He'd seen it coming. 14 years before it happened, he'd already known exactly what his daughter was capable of, and he'd built a wall around me instead of just hoping for the best. There's one more thing, he wrote, and I want you to know it, even if it never matters. Your father borrowed money from me once, back before you were born. $11,000 to keep that shop from closing the first time. I forgave that loan the year you turned 5. Never told Diane. Some debts you forgive quiet, so nobody has to carry the shame of owing them out loud. I read that line twice. My mother had grown up watching her own husband get bailed out silently. No lecture, no reckoning, just a debt that vanished. Maybe that's where she'd learned it. Maybe that's why she thought $40,000 could disappear the same way. Quiet, forgiven by nobody, just gone. It didn't make what she did right. It just made it make sense, and sense was worse in some ways, because it meant none of this was new. It was just her turn. The letter ended plain, no big speech. Take care of yourself first, he wrote. That's not selfish. That's just math, too. I folded it back along its old creases and set it on the table next to the duplicate trust filing, the one the bank had matched against their own copy down to the notary stamp. 2 documents, one dead man's signature on both, and it had taken an audit to make either of them matter. My phone buzzed around noon. Frank, they set a date, he said. No hello first. The house. Sheriff's sale is in 6 weeks. Okay, I said. Opening bid's $118,400, Frank said. Whatever we owe, plus fees. We can't touch that. His voice had gone somewhere flat I hadn't heard from him before. Not angry, not pleading, just tired all the way through. Have you talked to a lawyer about the timeline? I asked. Patricia's not our lawyer, Frank said. She was Gary's. We can't afford one of our own. Not really. There's assistance programs through the county, I said. I can send you a number if you want it. He went quiet a second. You'd do that? After everything. I'm not doing it for the house, I said. I'm doing it because you're still my father. Your mother won't ask you for help, Frank said. She's too proud for that now. Especially now. I'm not offering it to her, I said. I'm offering it to you. He didn't say much after that. I texted him the number for the county's emergency housing office once we hung up, and that was the whole of what I gave. One phone number, not a check, not a bailout, just a door I knew existed that maybe he didn't. Gary called that same evening, lighter than I'd heard him in weeks. Patricia filed the last of my paperwork today, he said. I'm off that note for good. Clean. That's good, Gary, I said, and meant it. Feels strange being the one who's fine, he said. 30 years side by side with my brother, and I'm the one walking away with my house. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. That's not strange. That's just what happens when you didn't do anything wrong. Your grandfather would have liked how you handled this, Gary said. I mean that. He always said you were the sharpest one in that family, even as a kid. He wrote me a letter, I said. I read it today. All the way through. Yeah? Gary said. What did he say? That some debts you forgive quiet, I said, so nobody has to carry the shame of owing them out loud. Gary went silent a second. Sounds like him, he said finally. He forgave me a debt once too. Small one. Never told a soul until just now, I guess. I didn't ask the amount. It didn't matter. It was just more proof of the same shape. A man who'd spent his whole life quietly covering for the people he loved, and then made sure one person in the next generation wouldn't need covering for it all. After we hung up, I sat back down with the letter and the trust filings side by side, and I thought about the shoebox on my closet shelf, 3 years of receipts, every folder dated, every fight I never had out loud sitting there instead in ink. I thought about Sunday. I decided that was when I'd take both documents out to the porch, just me, no phone, no folder tabs, and read the rest of what my grandfather left me the way he'd meant it to be read. Not as trustee, just as Meredith. Frank called again on Wednesday before I'd even finished my coffee. County turned us down, he said. For the assistance program? Said our files flagged, he said. Pending state investigation. They can't process a housing grant while there's an open fraud referral tied to the address. I sat with that a second. So the same $86,000 that's pulling the house down is the reason nobody can help you save it. That's about the size of it, Frank said. Neither of us said anything for a minute. It wasn't cruel what the county was doing. It was just how the paperwork worked. One flag on one file closed a door somewhere else, the same way Diane's flag on my trust had opened one. I'm sorry, I said, and I was, even though I hadn't drawn that line myself. Somebody had to draw it. It just happened to run straight through my father's front door. Not your fault, Frank said. I keep having to remind your mother of that. She wants somebody to blame besides herself, and you're standing closest. I know, I said. I've known that since the parking lot. She's not doing good, Meredith, Frank said, quieter. Not eating right. Not sleeping. I don't say that to make you feel bad. I just think you should know it's real, whatever's happening to her. I hear you, I said. I can't fix that part. Didn't ask you to, Frank said. Just wanted you to know. We hung up soon after. I didn't call Diane. I didn't call Gary either, not that day. I went to work, clocked my hours at the plant, ran invoices through the system the way I had every day since long before any of this started, and I let Wednesday be an ordinary Wednesday because somebody in that family needed one. Sunday came dry and a little cool for July, the kind of morning that makes you think fall's closer than it is. I made coffee, black, and carried the lockbox out to the porch along with the letter and the duplicate trust filing, the one that matched the bank's copy down to the notary stamp. I set them on the little table between the two chairs my grandfather used to sit in when he visited, back when I was small enough to sit on his knee instead of across from him. I read the letter again. Slower this time. I already knew the shape of it. 12,000 to start, 2,000 more every birthday, 14 years of it stacking up to $40,000 exactly. I already knew about the loan he forgave Frank Quiet, so nobody had to carry the shame of owing him out loud. I'd sat with all of that once already at my kitchen table and thought I'd gotten to the bottom of it. This time I noticed the last page different. There was a line at the very end I'd skimmed past both times before, tucked under his signature like an afterthought, small handwriting, like he'd added it after he thought the letter was already finished. I read it once. Then I set the page down on my knee and looked out at the street a minute, because I wanted to make sure I'd understood it before I let myself feel anything about it. Gary called that afternoon, like he did most Sundays now, just to check in. You doing okay? He asked. I'm on the porch, I said, reading Grandpa's letter again. Find anything new? There's a line at the end, I said. After his signature. I don't think even he meant it to be part of the letter. Looks at it on. What's it say? I'm not ready to say it out loud yet, I said. Not even to you. I want to sit with it a little longer. Gary didn't push. Take your time, he said. It's yours to sit with however long you need. Thanks, Gary. You know, he said, your grandfather used to sit on that same kind of porch himself. Different house, but same habit. Coffee, no radio, no company most mornings. Said a porch was the only room in a house where a man could hear himself think. I didn't know that, I said. Lot you didn't get to know about him, Gary said. 10 years old when he passed. That's not much time to learn a person. No, I said. It isn't. But he must have known you anyway, Gary said. Whatever's in that last line, if he wrote it thinking about you, then he saw something in you even then. Little as you were. I looked down at the page again after we hung up. The handwriting was smaller there, tighter, like he'd been running out of room or running out of time, one or the other. Diane texted that evening. Just one line, no explanation before or after it. Sheriff's sale notice came today, posted on the door. I stared at that message a long time before I answered it. I'm sorry, I typed back, and meant it, the same way I'd meant it with Frank. She didn't respond right away. Then, 20 minutes later, I keep thinking if I just told you the truth at 16, none of this happens. I thought about that. It was true, in a way. If she'd told me at 16, I'd have had 18 months of a real trust behind me instead of a lie. If she'd told me at 18, when the letter said the account should have come to me outright, I'd have had 6 years of it building instead of 6 years of watching it get spent down to nothing. You're right, I typed. But you didn't. And I stopped waiting on you two a long time ago. She didn't answer that one at all. I put the phone face down on the porch table and picked the letter back up, that last small line still sitting there under his signature, waiting on me the way it had been waiting, I guessed, for 14 years. I didn't read it out loud. Not yet. I wanted one more quiet evening before I let it be real. The way you sometimes want one more quiet minute before you open a door you already know what's behind. The street had gone that particular kind of still Marion gets on a Sunday evening, sprinklers ticking somewhere down the block, a dog barking twice and then giving up on it. I sat with my grandfather's last words to me folded on my knee, coffee gone cold in the cup beside it, and for the first time since Rosalind Kim had slid that filing across a conference table, I wasn't thinking about withdrawals or referrals or sheriff's sales at all. I was just thinking about a man on a porch, writing something down for a granddaughter he wouldn't get to watch grow up, hoping it would land the right way whenever it finally did. I read the last line out loud, finally, alone on the porch with the coffee gone cold beside me. I know she'll try to spend it before you're old enough to stop her, it said. That's why I made it so you wouldn't need her permission to stop her. You just needed the truth. I'm sorry it took this long to reach you. I sat there a minute with that. He'd known, not guessed, known. 14 years before any of it happened, my grandfather had already looked at his own daughter and understood exactly what she was capable of, and he'd built the one door around it that she couldn't talk her way through. I folded the letter along its creases one more time and set it back in the lockbox, on top of the duplicate trust filing, the one that matched the bank's copy down to the notary stamp. I didn't cry. I'd done my crying weeks ago, in a parking lot, before any of this had a name. The sheriff's sale came 6 weeks later, same as Frank said it would. I didn't plan on going. Then Gary called the morning of and asked if I wanted a ride, like it was already decided I'd be there, and I found myself saying yes before I'd really thought it through. You don't have to watch this, Gary said, pulling up outside my apartment. I know, I said. I want to anyway. We parked across from the shop on Delaware Avenue a little before 10. There were maybe a dozen people on the sidewalk, a county clerk with a clipboard, 2 men in ball caps who looked like they did this for a living, circling lots for cheap. The Colson Reliable Motors sign still hung over the bay doors, faded blue letters Frank had painted himself 20 years back, according to what Gary told me once. Frank stood off to one side with his hands in his jacket pockets. Diane stood a few feet from him, not touching, both of them watching the clerk read numbers off a sheet like it was any other Tuesday. Opening bid, $118,400, the clerk called out. Nobody said anything for a second. Then one of the men in ball caps raised 2 fingers. 118.4, the clerk said. Do I hear 120? Nobody topped it. It took maybe 90 seconds, start to finish, for 6 years of my parents' life to change hands for $118,400, the exact amount they owed and not a dollar more, because nobody wanted the building bad enough to pay extra for it. Sold, the clerk said. And that was it. Colson Reliable Motors belonged to somebody else. Diane didn't cry, not that I could see. She just stood there looking at the bay doors like she was trying to memorize them. Frank walked over to the clerk to sign something, and when he came back, his face had gone the color of the sidewalk. I got out of Gary's car. I don't know why. My legs just did it before my head caught up. Diane saw me first. She didn't say anything ugly this time. She just looked at me, tired all the way through, the way Frank had sounded on the phone weeks back. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I didn't come for you," I said. "I came because Gary asked, and because I didn't want to hide from something just because it's hard to look at." "We lost it," Diane said, like she still couldn't quite land the words somewhere real. 22 years, and some man in a ball cap bought it for less than what we owed the bank to begin with. "I know," I said. "Your grandfather's money would have covered the loan payments we missed," Diane said, "if it had still been there." I felt that one land, the way she still couldn't help reaching for it, even standing on the sidewalk watching the sale finish. "It was never there to cover anything," I said. "It was mine." That was the whole point of it. She didn't answer that. Frank came up behind her, papers in hand, and put a handlight on her shoulder. "Come on, Diane," he said. "Nothing left to do here." She let him steer her toward the car. She didn't look back at me, and I didn't call after her. Some things don't need a last word to be finished. Gary stood next to me on the sidewalk a minute, watching his brother's truck pull away. "Feels strange," Gary said, "watching that sign come down after all these years." "You okay?" I asked. "I will be," Gary said. "House is still mine. Name's clean." That's more than I figured I'd get out of any of this back when Patricia first called me. "Grandpa would have liked that part," I said. "You landing on your feet." "He'd have liked you more," Gary said, "for not needing anybody to land on yours." We got back in his car. Neither of us said much on the drive, and I was glad for that. Some quiet doesn't need filling. My phone buzzed that evening. A text from a number I didn't recognize at first, then did, once I read the area code. "Patricia Voss. Thought you'd want to know," it read. "State regulators completed their review of the Whetstone referral. Formal notice goes out to your mother this week. No criminal charges, given the family circumstances, and the trustee's decision not to pursue restitution beyond the account freeze, but it's on record now. Permanently." I read that twice. On record now. Permanently. Not a headline, not a courtroom, just a line in a file somewhere that would exist as long as the bank did, saying what happened, plain, the way Rosalind Kim had first laid it out across that conference table. I texted back one line. "Thank you for telling me." I set the phone down on my kitchen counter and looked at it a minute. 47 withdrawal slips and one clause about who owned what, all of it finally sitting where it belonged, filed and finished, instead of hiding in a shoebox or a lockbox or 6 years of somebody else's silence. Rosalind Kim called 2 weeks after that. I almost didn't pick up. A Whetstone number I didn't recognize on the screen. "Meredith? It's Rosalind. Got a minute?" "Sure," I said. "Everything okay?" "More than okay," she said. "I wanted you to hear this from me before it went out as a form letter." "Hear what?" "The bank's changing how it handles trust accounts," she said. "Starting next month, every beneficiary gets a letter mailed to them directly the year they turn 18. Not the cosigner, not the parent. Them." I sat down at my kitchen table. "Because of me?" "Because of your file," Rosalind said. "Compliance pulled 62 other trusts opened before 2005 with the same setup. Minor beneficiary, adult joint signer, no direct notice clause. We're mailing all 62 kids their own letter this year, whether they're 18 already or turning it soon." 62, I said. 62, she said. "Some of them are going to open an envelope and find out they've had money the whole time nobody told them about. Some of them are going to find out it's already gone. Either way, they'll know. That's the part that changes." "That's a lot of people," I said. "It's a policy now," Rosalind said. "Not a favor. Legal made us write it up formal. It's got a number and everything." "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Thought you'd want to know your name's attached to something besides a fraud referral," she said, "even if nobody outside the building ever sees it that way." We hung up not long after. I sat there with my coffee going cold, thinking about 62 envelopes going out to 62 kids in towns I'd never see, each one maybe finding out the same thing I found out in a conference room with a folder and a notary stamp. I didn't feel like celebrating. It just felt like something closing the right way, quiet, on paper, the way most of this had gone from the start. Gary stopped by that Saturday with a box of tomatoes from his garden, more than I could ever eat on my own. "Diane's staying with her sister in Bucyrus," he said, setting the box on my counter. "Frank's renting a place off Main Street. Small one. Says it's fine. Is it?" I asked. "No," Gary said, "but it's honest, at least. First honest thing that house has been in years. You talk to him much?" "Every few days," Gary said. "He's working at a dealership now. Salesman, not owner. Says it's strange, not carrying the weight of the whole place on his back anymore." "And Diane?" Gary shook his head. "She doesn't call me. I think she's ashamed, and I think being ashamed in front of me is worse for her than being ashamed in front of a stranger." "You were never a stranger to her," I said. "No," Gary said. "That's probably why. I didn't ask if he'd forgiven her. Some things aren't mine to ask about even now." He set the last tomato on the counter and looked around my kitchen, small and plain, dishes drying on a rack by the sink. "You did good here," he said. "This is a real life, built out of nothing but your own two hands." "I had help," I said. "A dead man's help, but help." "He'd say the same about you," Gary said, "that you did the actual work." He just left the door unlocked. He left around 4, and I carried the tomatoes to the porch and set them in a bowl on the little table where I'd read the letter that Sunday. I hadn't been back out there in a couple weeks. The evening was warm, a little humid, the kind that makes the whole street smell like cut grass and somebody's charcoal grill 3 houses down. I got the lockbox again. I don't know why I still went back to it. Maybe because it was the one object in my life that had never lied to me. Not once. Not even when everybody around it had. The letter was where I'd left it, folded along the same 3 creases. I didn't read the whole thing again. I knew it by now, every line, the $12,000 to start, the $2,000 a year, the loan he forgave Frank without a word to anyone. I turned straight to the last page, to the line under his signature, small and tight like he'd run out of room. I read it again anyway. Then I turned the page over, the way you do when you're not ready to put something down yet. And I found one more line I hadn't noticed before, written even smaller, right at the bottom edge where the paper had started to yellow. "I put my name on this so you'd never have to raise your voice to keep it." I sat very still with that for a second. Then I laughed, just once, short and quiet, because of course he had. Of course that was the whole plan from the start, back before I could even spell trustee, a man deciding the safest thing he could leave his granddaughter wasn't money at all. It was a signature that would do the fighting for her, years after he was gone, so she'd never have to. I thought about the parking lot, my mother's voice cracking through the phone. I thought about the conference room, Rosalind's folder sliding across the table, Diane's face going the color of the wall behind her. Through all of it, I never once raised my voice. I didn't have to. He'd already raised his, on paper, 14 years early, and left it waiting for the day I'd need it. My phone buzzed on the table beside the tomatoes. A text from Frank, of all people. Saw a listing for a used Corolla at the dealership. Good shape, fair price. Thought of you since yours is getting up there in miles. No strings, just noticed. I looked at that a minute. Not an apology. Not quite family either. Just a man doing the one small decent thing available to him from wherever he'd landed. "Thanks, Frank," I typed back. "I'll take a look." I didn't say anything else. He didn't either. That was fine. Some relationships end up living in small, plain messages like that, and there's nothing wrong with letting them stay there. I put the letter back in the lockbox, latched it, and set it on the chair beside me instead of back on the shelf. I wasn't ready to put it away for good. Not yet. Maybe not for a long while. The street had gone quiet the way Marion does once the sprinklers shut off, and the porch lights start clicking on one by one down the block. I sat with the tomatoes going warm in the bowl and the lockbox shut beside me, and for once I wasn't thinking about withdrawal slips or sheriff's sales or a folder sliding across a table. I latched the lockbox one more time and set it in my lap. The porch light clicked on above me and I just sat there, letting it,